Douglas Murray, hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Thank you very much for being here in our studio.
It's a great pleasure.
So we had an interview just a couple of weeks ago, and now you're here, and it's a great honor for us. We should say journalist, author, and a friend of Israel, if I may say.
I think it's a good introduction.
So Douglas Murray, what is your motivation, first of all, of being here in Israel, the motivation behind your visit? After all, unlike others, you didn't need the proof that Israel didn't commit and didn't invent any atrocities of October 7th.
Well, the first thing is it's my pleasure and honor to be here. I've been in Israel many times in recent years. First conflict I covered here was the 2006 Lebanon war. And I always try to be here and see things for myself, as with other conflict zones. But by the way, the fact that you say, I didn't need to see for myself, it's so sad to even think that Israel has to prove to the world that Israel was assaulted. I've been here more than a week now. I'm staying for some time, but it saddens me enormously to hear Israelis, friends, professional colleagues and others talking about Israel's need to show the world what happened. No other country has to say, after being assaulted and losing its citizens, how can we reassure the world that this actually happened? To see a denial of atrocity in real time is, I think, even for some of us hardened journalists, pretty surprising that it should ever have even come to that.
And on top of this, now we're facing a battle over, the legitimacy of our actions in Gaza. How do we confront that in terms of your point of view? The fact that after we've been experiencing these atrocities, we have to fight the Hamas, and then we find the world like Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, that talks about what's going on in Gaza without condemning the Hamas.
I mean, that is, as you all know, and most of your viewers know, that is absolutely par for the course for the United Nations. If Israel is assaulted, they will spend a few minutes, maybe a few hours on that before you get on to the condemnation of Israeli reaction. I say, if they want to call for a ceasefire, they should have been calling for a ceasefire on 7th of October. There wasn't an exact ceasefire, but if there was a ceasefire, Hamas broke it. And you cannot, it's like a stranger going up to somebody in the street, punching them, discovering that they're a jiu-jitsu expert, and then saying, actually, on second thoughts, I'd like not, let's go to the bit before I punched you. Nobody can put up with this. The Israelis have to explain, I think, that to the world community, just keep saying it without expecting to persuade everyone that it was Hamas that broke the ceasefire. And as far as I can see, it's not for me to advise Israelis, but as far as I can see, you can't live with Hamas. I was down there on the border the other day in one of the kibbutz. Who could live here if they knew that Hamas was meters away? It's intolerable, and the world needs to realize that.
And it seems like you managed to explain the Israeli narrative in a brilliant way.
Better than us.
Way better than the Israeli official representatives and spokesmen.
You've got very, very good spokespersons. I have to say, one of the things I do notice is that Israeli spokespeople, communications is much better now than it was 15 years ago, say. There are a lot of people on your side internationally. There are a lot of voices out there, actually, who do support Israel. I know that a lot of Israelis feel completely embattled and the world hates us and all that. It isn't the case. There are some very loud voices.
You know why? Because when we see the demonstration, even in London, that's supporting Hamas, this is what the Israeli think, that all the world is against us.
Well, we have a problem in London, where I'm from, obviously. But that's our problem, and it's our shame that we should have 100,000 people marching through the streets shouting Hamas slogans. That's our shame. And it will be for the British people to have to deal with that at some point.
But can you explain that? Is it pro-Palestinian or is it anti-Semitism?
Or ignorance?
It's all of those. I mean, when we know a lot of the people in London who are Muslim chanting from the river to the sea know exactly what they're talking about. And when they chant, Hamas slogans, they know exactly what they're talking about. You've got a small cohort, maybe 20%, who don't know what river they're talking about, don't know what sea they're talking about, and wouldn't be able to identify them if you showed them a map. you know, there is a level of ignorance among sort of certain young propagandists who've imbibed a certain type of American idiocy who do this stuff. But most of the dynamism for those protests comes, as in France and other countries, from I'm sad to say, from within the immigrant Muslim communities. And as I say, that's something we're going to have to address in Europe. It's a deep shame that it should be, you know, in Berlin and in London and in Paris that we see these big protests. But I just want the people of Europe to realize, you know, Israel's on the front line of this. You faced Intifada, you faced Hamas. You know, we've had a taste of it, and we don't want much more.
So it seems like it's hypocrisy at its finest.
Well, I just wonder, I mean, you know, the only group I can think of in our lifetimes to have been remotely like Hamas is obviously ISIS. And I don't remember when the West was battling ISIS, demands that we fuel ISIS's war machine or give them electricity or any of this. There's an obscenity about this whole discussion that goes on with groups like the International Red Cross, where they seem to think this is a conflict between two equal sides rather than a terrorist group and a state. And they demand that the state protects the terrorist group. And the fact she can't even answer that question about the civilians, I mean, I would love to know what the clear delineation is she has in her mind between Hamas and the innocent citizenry of Gaza.
True. Okay. So
they voted for them.
We are waiting for Rami. So the hostages issue cannot be denied in any situation, and yet we see people in the US, in the UK, rip down the hostages posters. We don't see pressure from the governments, from the administration, enough pressure. How come?
It's an incredibly good question. I wish I had the answer to it. The ripping down of posters is just an unbelievable obscenity, which we've seen in America, we've seen in Europe and elsewhere. I'm only glad that there are also lots of videos of people confronting the people tearing down those posters. One can only hope the people that are doing that, who are doing the ripping down, are just woefully ignorant, because the only other explanation is unbelievable evil on their part. But many people do confront the people trying to do that, because many people realize what an obscenity it is. It's a very straightforward demand. As we just heard from Yarden, you know, nobody did anything wrong. None of the hostages did anything wrong. They were in their homes. They were celebrating. They were with their loved ones. And I hope that the message can be made clearer from around the world, and particularly from world leaders. You know, if Hamas wanted to have a ceasefire, if the world wants to have a ceasefire, then give the hostages back today, and that would be a start.
If I may ask one more question, your bestseller is The War on the West. So has the war on the West begun?
Oh, you bet. Oh, you bet. And Israel, as so often in the past, is on the front line. But it is my absolute conviction, from traveling very widely in the world and seeing many conflicts, that it's Israel's burden to be on the front line, but it's all other countries next. And that's one of many reasons why the civilized world has to stand with this country and should stand with this country, and why most of the civilized world does.
Douglas Murray, thank you so much for your questions and for the answers.
Pleasure.
And for being here and for being a friend.
For us.
It's my honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.